Hello everybody, thank you very much for tuning into the Glad Report, first episode of the year 2026. As you can see, I'm outside. I'm at the UPND Alliance Secretariat here in Ibex. As you can see, colored in red.
For the power of truth, this is the Glad Report.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for tuning in today's episode of the Glad Report. We're just closing in on the month of June, and I thought it necessary to get off this Katele Kalumba-esque behavior and finally bring myself back into the light and present to you what Zambia looks like in terms of the political and economic scene as we approach the August 13th, 2026 elections. Without further ado, I'm glad with the report. First things first, the last time I was here, it was when commenting on the peculiarities of the Lungu funeral proceedings. As we speak, as of the 23rd of June, the week that we've just closed, the court cases have been finalized, they have reached a conclusion, and they've agreed, or rather it has been judged, that the Lungu family will decide where the body is buried, and they've decided to bury it in South Africa. Whether or not I can offer my commentary, what's done has been done, what's been said has been said, what's been decided has been decided. What I'm curious about is whether history will be kind to us. Will it be kind to the government of the time? And will it be kind to the Lungu family? Only time will tell. Election analysis. UPND Alliance, I actually went for a press conference that they had a couple of days ago. And I had quite the joy in interacting with these politicians. It was quite amusing. So the UPND Alliance is comprised of 16 political parties. The most famous faces, at least most famous to me, most famous names, you have Hyvie Hamdudu, we have former Vice President Novus Mombe, we also have Charles Malupi, and quite frankly, on the day of, the star of the show for me was Mr. Miles Sampa. I was actually quite amused by his commentary on the day with regards to how he completely denounced ever being part of the PF cabinet over the years 2011 to 2021. Just separating himself from the confusion that was there at the time and saying he's not a part of the mess that we're trying to clean up now, that the United Party for National Development is trying to clean up now. And it's actually quite amusing. Like, I was amused to the hilt, quite literally, when he said he wasn't a part of the cabinet. This is a person who has, in his portfolio, has been former Deputy Minister of Finance, former Deputy Minister of Commerce. So the only role that he aligned himself with was him being his worship former mayor of Lusaka. If I wasn't there, if somebody showed me a video, I myself would have assumed there was artificial intelligence, considering the age that we live in. But quite frankly, you know politics, and you know it makes very strange bedfellows.
At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the President for the Patriotic Front. The President for the Patriotic Front, former Deputy Minister, Ministry of Finance, Honorable, and the Mayor, the great Mayor of Lusaka, former Mayor of the great city of Lusaka, Honorable Miles Sampa. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may I speak while standing? I'm still in Parliament mood of speaking while standing. The Alliance Chairman, Wamilupi, and fellow Alliance Presidents, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone joining us online. Mr. Chairman, let me start by a disclaimer. To disclaim myself, those who destroyed the economy of Zambia. The previous cabinet, me, I wasn't in that cabinet.
Over this event, I also asked a question, and I asked, where will these individuals be placed when they're actually, if they're actually, beg your pardon, put into power? If the UPND is voted back in, where will these 16 individuals be taking up roles? Will they be the presidential advisors? Will they be occupying roles in cabinet? We're yet to tell. I mean, names like Felix Mutati, who's also part of the alliance, were already serving as Minister of Science and Technology. So will that portfolio continue, or will there be a reshuffle? Currently, cabinet has been dissolved, so we're yet to see how things are going to settle. It was a very, as these political press conferences go, very, especially if you're the one in power, very boastful, very braggadocious, talking about how there's no vocabularism, which is true. But I think a lot of the time the main criticism is that people cannot eat civil liberties. So even if there's an improvement in just how the environment, it's less aggressive and less hostile, people can't eat that. So the main thing I think for me was this cost of living crisis and how it's being addressed. But in the spirit of being very boastful, very braggadocious, the economic conversation was characterized by referencing a lot of macroeconomic indicators. GDP having gone up from about 19 billion to today sitting at about 34 billion, actually quite impressive, I have to give it to them. Inflation, we've dropped from what it was in 2021, it being from just over 20%, I believe 24%. Today, it's at 6.8%, well within the 6 to 8% target band of the Bank of Zambia. We also have an increase in mining investment, whether it's with regards to first quantum minerals. There's just a lot of indicators of better. Vedanta is back into the country with KCM, albeit with a lot of contentious matters with regards to how they're not following the new terms of their agreement. And that really is where my issue is, with regards to how these macroeconomic indicators really speak to the literati. They speak to the people, you could say the higher echelons, where you have to be a high net worth individual to be able to understand what these metrics mean. If you don't understand economics, and I'm speaking to a person on the street, these economic indicators mean nothing. If we're going to reference just on the micro level, the cost of living crisis looms in terms of how it's been able to trickle down, just with reference to income levels. If you're a person who's getting paid 1,000 kwacha, like as a gardener or as a maid, and then today is still getting paid the same amount, or you're a public service worker, where it is true salaries have been increased every now and then, but they've not matched the increase in fuel, increase in electricity. Take, for instance, something that everybody cares about, medium meal prices. Medium meal prices have tripled from what they were in 2021 to what they are now in 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're to pay attention to just one event, which I think is a harbinger of danger, was the stone throwing that happened in the Copper Belt. It is true, it was an extension of how the people in the Copper Belt felt when the Sansali mine was taken away from them. But really, though it's not widespread, it's indicative of how the people are feeling. There is disillusionment, discontentedness, this being expressed in these little events that, if left unchecked in the long term, people won't appreciate all these macroeconomic improvements if they fail to trickle down to the people. So that's my critique on the cohort of the UPND Alliance. Do they have the capacity and economic acumen to trickle down what they've done in terms of the heavy lifting of the macroeconomics, to bring it down to the people so they can actually experience the benefits of these improvements? Only time will tell if they're to continue and have the baton passed on from themselves to themselves, really.
Thank you very much for the press conference. My name is Ntala Shamonse. I'm an independent freelance journalist. I have 3 sets of questions. My first question is actually adding on to what the lady asked about cost of living. So with regards to cost of living crisis, I understand that there's a tendency with politicians to remark on macroeconomic indicators improving. It is true, GDP has gone up. It is true, inflation has improved. We're within the Bank of Zambia target between 6 and 8%. Reserves are encouraging, we're on 6.4 billion. But on a micro level, the cost of living crisis looms. So there's a failure of the macroeconomic improvements to trickle down to the people at the bottom. If you can see from what the World Bank has reported, we're the 6th most unequal country in the world and 6th poorest. A lot of these poor people are in the rural areas. So again, with the politicians, they focus on the people in the urban areas who get the benefits of these macroeconomic improvements. So my first question is, for the people in the urban areas, what are we doing to address the cost of living crisis so that we have these improvements trickle down? And then for the people in the rural areas, even though it's not as politically sensitive, what are we doing to have them also have their livelihoods improve to levels of prosperity?
I was asked about the cost of living. And sometimes we ask this question. My colleagues have tried to explain. Let me just give you one example. When your inflation is growing by 24% or thereabout, it doesn't matter what you do to increase the wages. If you increase your wages by 6% or 10%, you are actually delivering a pay cut. So the mere fact that HH is bringing inflation to below 6% is making your wage increase of 10% a positive increase. Simple example.
I think the gist of our question was these macro indicators which are positive in many directions. She was wondering, why are they not trickling down to the people? Okay. And then she contrasted the urban people and also the rural people. With the urban people, she was questioning what's happening on the cost of living. And on the rural people, when are they also going to enjoy maybe improved living standards? Let me start by saying that when the president says we have done the heavy lifting, there were so many things broken down with the economy. I think the figures have been put in the public domain here. What has happened is to place an economy now in a position where it is going to grow. And I talked a little bit about these pillars. We're talking about, in the first pillar, growth of the economy. We're talking about agriculture, we're talking about mining, we're talking about all these things. As they grow, as investment comes in, the buildup of economic benefits starts from the level where it was, from the low level. Employment levels also start up to go up. For example, I'll give you an example of Mulungushi Textiles, which was closed. When it opens, it does not mean that all of a sudden it jumps to, I don't know, ultimate number of employees to be employed. It rises steadily because it responds to business procedures and so on. When 28 shaft in Luansha which in August starts producing, because so far we've only been dewatering or pumping out the water, that will result in people now being employed to go and carry out mining operations. When Mingomba, that is just north of Chirabombwe, the shaft was sunk. Yeah, that is the start. Money has come in, but to start the sinking of the shaft and the operations, that will result in greater weight. The targets that Honorable Mutati was talking about, to reach those targets, it means there has to be employment, there has to be economic activities. Okay. So we are confident, having placed the economy on a growth trajectory, the next 5 years will begin to reap the rewards of that which has been done already. Look at the rural areas. I was saying, when are they going to have a life which is easier, I suppose? You know, one of the criticisms coming from the other side, and sometimes they say things, maybe I digress a little bit. You have heard from the number of presidents here, and each one of them who spoke, I was able to say how talented this alliance is. Because the other side, whether it's Munduvira Makebizo, cannot reach the level that these people individually were presenting to yourselves. Yeah? That I can tell you. Yeah. If you go in rural areas, I passed through last week in one of the rural areas, and people are talking about cost of millimero and so on. In those areas, nobody talks about the cost of millimero because they have produced their own food. They are able to sell it. And one of the things when we talk about, oh no, it must be 50 kwacha. No, what this government did, what the HH did, was to understand, number one, that 60-70% of our food is produced by small-scale farmers, village farmers, peasant farmers. And they were producing it at a loss. You produce a bag of maize, you sell it at NRFA, the price you are getting was always less than the cost of producing, whether it was for small-scale farmer, medium farmer, or even commercial farmers. That is why they left growing maize. He pushed up the producer price up to a price higher than it cost those people to produce. So those raw people who are growing the maize for us, over 60-70% of that, are now able to generate an income out of the sweat of the labor. So that has improved things. But the main thing is that where we are now, as the economy grows, it will be felt.
And then this is a lovely cohort of 16 presidential parties. What roles will you play in the new government? What are you going to take part in the cabinet? How exactly are you going to occupy these positions of power?
According to this cohort of individuals, the main opposition party, the one they see as their biggest threat, is the UPND Alliance, spearheaded by Mr. Honorable Brian Mundubile. The cohort, the UPND Alliance, has described them as a dangerously unprepared team. I beg your pardon, dangerously unprepared to lead, a product of confusion, and they want to come back and deplete the reserves, come and eat the reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, do with this information as you wish. I am simply the messenger. I am glad with the report. Thank you.
For the power of truth, this is the Glad Report.